All right, so you guys are in for a treat today. So Tiffany, I think I figured it out that I've known you. I think I met you at like my first rate conference, and this was. It feels
I
like
think we were in San Diego.
yeah, it feels like a long time ago. I don't know how long. I think it was probably 2009 or 10.
Yeah.
Like it feels like a long time ago. And I've always admired. You seem to be a hard charger in a lot of different areas of your life, and I've always admired that about you. You know, it's like we're in hanging out in Maine, and you're like getting up and running up a mountain after hanging out late, listening to music, and then you've got the kids, and you've got the multiple streams of income and businesses, and a difficult market, and so that's why I wanted to have you on just to chat with us kind of about your business and give us start with a little bit of a backstory, and then I'll kind of just take you through the different phases of growth, what you felt ready for, what you were totally ill-equipped for. It's like the good, the bad, the ugly of building a real estate business. So the more open and honest you are about the struggles, I think it'll serve our clients that much better. So why don't you start off just with a kind of just like a quick intro, like how you got into the business, what market you serve, the complexion of the team, how many people, how many units, GCI you'll do this year. Kind of give us the overview.
Sure. So I got in the business 14 years ago, not having any idea what I was getting myself into. As an individual agent for about a year. Figured out really quickly I'm not good at most things, so started hiring and building a team from there. And always had sort of not easy success, but I had enough talent and enough ability to kind of think on my feet fast that I could make it work with what I had. And the business sort of built itself and grew itself somewhat by accident, I think. We hit our first $1 million year 7 years ago, and we were in the midst of the correction, and we were going through short sales and foreclosures, and we accidentally on purpose got heavily involved in distress sales. My first sale that I had was a $999,000 new build. So I had really focused my initial business build on very high end. And if we had not accidentally on purpose shifted to short sales and foreclosures and helping distressed homeowners, we probably wouldn't have survived, the tough years of 6, 7, and 8. And what came of it is my business grew more in those distressed years than it ever did in the big years. So we learned really how to work harder and smarter and figure out the niche for us. And then coming off of those years, the business had sort of built itself, and the team had built itself, and the business kind of continued as we came out of the recession. Now, what happened to us over the last 3 years is that we were unequipped for what was coming in our market as far as discount brokers and no inventory and tons of new agents in the market. And it kind of hurt us. And I think part of the reason why it hurt me was because, and maybe out of arrogance or laziness, I think what we'd always done had always worked. And I wasn't paying close enough attention to see that what we'd always done wasn't continuing to work, and our profitability started to take a hit, and we started losing team members, and it really became chaotic. And I think it probably peaked about 6 months ago when I lost my entire buyer team. I had almost my entire buyer team. I had 5 buyer agents all leave my team to go to another team. I lost my top producing listing partner a few months before that, who had sold 70 units last year. And so I was sat looking at my office space that we had just built out and spent a lot of money on it, thinking, how are we going to pay for all this? So I jumped back into production. So we've salvaged the year. We're probably still going to clear. We're sitting at about $1 million GCI right now. We need to be at about $1.4 million to be where we should be right now. But the game changer was I brought in about $400,000 of that gross commission. So it's paying for overhead. And now we can rebuild the team in a slower, more methodical fashion than I ever had before. So we're seeing good success, and I recognize pretty clearly where my downsides were, where my faults were, and how I was hiring. I was always hiring out of desperation, and I'm a forever optimist like you. And somebody comes in, I spend 15 minutes with them and think they're going to be amazing, and I hire them, and then they start, and I can't figure out why I hired them. But then I made the second mistake, which was I let people stick around for a really long time that were not having success because I just over-owned the problem and wanted to fix the problem. It was my problem to fix and not theirs. So definitely learned, it's only taken me 14 years to get there, but I think we've kind of got it figured out as far as how we hire and how we bring people on board and how long we let them fail before we cut them loose.
So let's there's so much goodness in there, which doesn't feel good going through it. I know that. But let's just go through hiring, and let's talk about all the mistakes that we've made hiring people, because I think there's so many good lessons in there, and maybe what we're taking away in terms of, how we're hiring going forward and how we're identifying talent. I know it's more patterns versus potential, really digging into who they are as people. But when you're at the point, which can't feel good when team members decide to leave, especially as a group. What's I think your reaction, I think I know it, but I want to hear you talk through, like, how did that feel? How'd you deal with it? Was it just a jump into action and do whatever it takes? Was there any self-reflection, about how you can do it differently going forward? Let's really spend a little bit of time there, if you would. I know it's probably pretty challenging to talk about, but what can we learn from it?
So I think there's a couple steps to it. For starters, if you have a room full of the wrong people and you bring in somebody who's very possibly the right person or the right type of person, they will likely not survive. They will either get sucked into the other vortex, or they will leave. Those are the only two options. If you don't, I think I've talked to a lot of people over the past that have had that house cleaning, whether it's intentional or not intentional, and coming out the other side saying, oh, thank God that happened, because had we not had that house cleaning, we likely would never have been able to build what we really wanted it to be. So if I could reverse myself back 14 years to the first person I hired and understand how critical it is when you hire your first person to make sure that they are spot on, because that is going to be the link to every future hire you have, unless you get rid of them if they're not the right fit for you. So the first thing was we had no choice but to wait until everybody left or force everybody out. And that was a lesson for me, was that I was still hanging on thinking, oh my gosh, if we lose everybody, there's no way we can survive this. But what it ended up being is, if we didn't lose everybody, there would have been no way to survive it. So the first step was to make sure we're hiring right and clean out what we had that was not right. So then the next step was to really dig into hiring and who people were. And I did do that really well. I spent 7 or 8 hours per person digging in. I knew who they were. What I hadn't figured out yet was, who do we not want? I was, asking all the right questions, taking them through all of career visioning, knew who they were, where they came from, everything about them. But I didn't know how to recognize, okay, these are red flags. Somebody tells you that they're a 10 out of 10 for every trait that you're asking to verify is a problem, because it means they're not coachable. So I'm still have a ton to learn, but I've also learned that I should be going through 100 people to find one really good one, and not just going through 5 and feeling discouraged because we didn't find somebody that just felt like they were a perfect match for us. So that's sort of the progression, is that if you've got the wrong people, get rid of them. They're not helping you. They're hurting you anyways. And the 6 months after the mass departure hits, I look at what they're doing and they're still not doing anything. So I can stop owning their failure and start owning the success of the agents that I have, and learning to deal with the conflict and the confrontation of having to put people on the spot when they're not meeting expectations, because I can start to see the pattern that agents start to hit if they're starting to fall out of core values and cultures and sort of patterns of success.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit, because I know we chatted when you were going through it. Let's talk a little bit about how tight market, stuff that was working 4 or 5 years ago wasn't working as well. Agents that weren't driving, returns on the leads that you were, the opportunities you were giving them. How do you navigate? Let's just talk about the economic part of all this, and having the overhead, having to sort of just navigate a tight market where you're spending money on stuff that didn't work like it used to. Let's kind of dig into a little bit. I think there's some lessons to learn, on how to shift, because everyone's in a shift, whether your team leaves or whether the market is, for you, it's a welcome shift. I know, because you had like no listings available. But let's talk about, I don't know if my question makes sense, but let's talk about some of that if you can.
Well, one of my first coaching calls with Lars at 6 o'clock in the morning involved go stop spending about, I think we cut about 35% out of our marketing budget. And thankfully we did that when we did, because what came after that was it would have been really ugly had I not stopped spending as much as I had been spending on lead generation, because we were in a super tight market. We were had no inventory, which means we were spending a lot of money on radio and television. And when there's no sellers, there's just no sellers. I mean, you can't produce a seller that doesn't exist. And we have so much competition, both on the air and on TV, that it just is diluting the message. So we scaled that back as far as we could without, taking it too far, and started really focusing on where can we get good, solid, less expensive business from, and starting with making sure that our agent patterns were in place. So that was where we started really rocking the boat with the team, was because I was hammering on them to be in the office, making their dials, getting on the dialer. And now the rumor on the street is Tiffany's hard to work for because she makes you come to the office, which I'm over that, because that's comical. But you would think that you don't actually have to come to the office and work to actually earn a living. But that was the first thing, is focusing on cutting expenses wherever we could without cutting so much that we didn't have any business coming in. And then really digging in on the patterns and the work behavior of the people that were responsible for converting the leads and taking advantage of what we did, and getting really transparent with the team that we were spending way too much money and we couldn't continue to spend the money we were, which also was a catalyst for them leaving, was because they were concerned that I was just going to cut all the leads. And really, we had so many leads that cutting the leads was not going to faze anybody.
Yeah. And it's, and some of the lead sources too, maybe if we can kind of talk about some of your lead sources, some of them just they don't work anymore. Like the numbers, we've got folks in our program that are spending $20,000 a month on Zillow, and the economics don't work. Their agents are happy, but they're losing money as the business owner. So it is really, every 3 months as a business owner, it's going through every dollar you're spending, and is this returning what it should, or is my team working this lead source to the level they should, so that the business is going to be healthy financially. What are some of the lead sources that you found you had to scale back because they weren't returning? And was it that your agents weren't working the leads, or was it because the leads were getting out of whack, like Zillow or Realtor.com in your area?
I think radio and TV is the hardest one to pinpoint, because I think we get business from radio and TV sometimes and don't realize we get business from it. I know that, like, my sphere of influence, I was born and raised here, I grew up here, and our radio and TV, I know, reinforces my sphere outside my actual touchable sphere. People that I went to high school with or grew up with, those people will contact me sometimes, and I know that a lot of the reasons why they do is because they've seen us heard us on the radio and seen us on TV. Zillow has just become so expensive that the leads are great. I mean, nobody would ever complain about a Zillow lead, but to pay $350 for a lead that you have a really, a small shot at getting that thing converted to earn a $9,000 total commission for the team does make it a losing proposition. But we also wanted to make sure we didn't cut it back so far that we couldn't feed our people, because I'd rather have us breaking even and having my buyer agents, stay intact and surviving through the market than to just cut it down to zero and then have no agents at all. So that was really where we had to play with the numbers to make sure we had enough business coming in to keep them fed, because they still need to pay, their bills, but also not spending so much that we were losing money. So our profitability has jumped dramatically from last year to this year. We're going to probably end up about the same dollar volume, because our average sale price is up so much because I'm selling. But our profitability is going to jump from, I think we hit like 6% last year. We should be close to 20 to 22% by the end of the year this year. Plus, we moved to brokerages. We had a lot of expenses that we incurred. So really looking forward to 2019 to be kind of a mellow, sort of predictable year, whereas this 17 and 18 have been very unpredictable. We built out a really amazing office space and made a move, and then didn't have anybody sitting in the seats. So this year's really focusing on getting the right people in the seats to help pay for the space, so I can stop having to carry all of it. It's frustrating to sell. I did $5 million in production in October, and 100% of it's going right into the team. So we don't want to have that happen next year.
Yeah. What, let's dig a little bit into hiring and getting agents productive. What's your current process with all the lessons you've learned around people? Let's really break down the current process of finding, buyer agents that are going to be a good fit for your team.
I think in the initial meeting, I do take the first meeting with them. And I think it's important where I'm at in my business right now to be their first face, because we do have a lot of competition right now. And so they're meeting with a lot of other people. And if they don't meet directly with me the first time, I don't think I engage them enough to get through the process it's going to take to hire them. So in the first meeting, I set really clear expectations and let them know that the market's tough and that this is the nastiest I've seen real estate, and they need to be prepared for what they're going to be faced when they go out there, that it doesn't look like, HGTV, glorious, glamorous business, and really dig in to make sure that that's what they're on for, and that their why is big enough for them to get through what I think is going to be a really tricky 6 to 8 months in this business. I think what we saw last year was tough. I think what we see this coming year is going to be probably equally as tough. I think we're going to see some stalemate in our market. We're already seeing it. We're down. September, we were down 19% as a market from the year prior, and I think we'll probably see October the same numbers. So we're going to have to go back like we were in the short sale years and work really, really hard and fight tooth and nail for every deal that we have. And so I scare people away sometimes in that first meeting, and I'm okay with that, because if they really aren't ready to roll up their sleeves and get dirty to make this work, then they should go work somewhere else, because I can't have that on the team. And then we kind of progressively get, if you've never taken career visioning, I strongly recommend it, because it's really helped me get to know people really well. And through career visioning, when they're hired, I have a really good bond with people from day one. And I know all of their bumps and their bruises and their history and all the things that happened to them, good, bad, or otherwise, growing up, and the adversity they faced, and really what's going on in their life. And until I really started going through that process, I didn't know my people that well. And so I couldn't figure out what motivated them and what they needed from us.
Yeah. I took Recruit Select once before I was with KW, and then I took Career Visioning, and it really is, it's just like it says, we're figuring out if this is a good fit for you. So we're going to spend, 8 to 10 hours together, and we've cut it down a little bit and optimized the process a little bit. But you're spending hours with somebody to figure out if this position that you have available is really a good fit for them. And so I think that's the cool part of it. And you know more about them than probably 95% of people that know this person. So you can really make that judgment call if it's a patterns, is this person going to show up and bring what we need to this team, or are they going to detract from the team? So that's really, really cool.
I hired a gal about a month ago from another brokerage, and I took her through all of career visioning, and it was another KW office, so she had to go talk to her team leader before I could even make her an offer, and they made her a great offer, and she turned it down without even knowing what I was offering them, financially what I was offering her. And she said, because no one took the time to get to know her and understand the needs that she had to make sure they were a fit. And she was like a lead that I closed before I ever even gave her any financial financial incentive to come to the team.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what's one thing in your business, or what's one thing you would have done differently if you could do it all over again?
Do I have to pick one thing? I think I would have grown the business differently. I would have slowed the process of growing the team down to understand how to run my business better, because I never had to pay attention to profit and loss statement. We were always profitable because I was always selling, and we were always growing, and we were always doing more and more and more. So I never took the time to set up things like our dashboards and setting up, tracking sheets and paying attention to ROI and conversion and what people were doing and what they weren't doing. I just was running up a hill like you said, I can go out until 2 o'clock in the morning and run up a mountain, but at 48 years old, you start to get tired. And about a year ago was the first time that I thought, I'm done with real estate. I'm done with people stepping on me. I'm done with people just not doing their job. And I'm finished with this. And it took some bumps and bruises to realize that it really starts and ends with me. Even if they're terrible, I hired them and I let them stay here. So I really had to control spending so that I could have the luxury of saying, okay, we're just going to stop hiring. I probably let some talent go because I became so gun shy of hiring that I don't want to hire anybody. I mean, it would take, a serious hotshot to come in here and let me even be interested in hiring them, because I just kind of like PTSD, like I saw all the potential things that were going to go wrong in the next 3 years, and I was going to end up right back where I was again.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are you most excited about when you think of the future of your business?
I think I've stopped caring about being the biggest and really am focused on being the best and the most profitable, because we used to be the biggest. We were number one, number two, number three in our market. Now we're sitting like probably 15 or 16 in size because we have some big mega teams that are here. And it's a relief to just not care about being as big as they are and care more about building something that I drive in the parking lot and I'm excited to see all the cars parked there, and I don't have anxiety over one or two of the people that are in the office because they just suck the life out of me. And I think that's just comes with maturity, is that my ego is in check and my competitive nature is a little bit under control.
Yeah, that, man, I could talk for an hour on that. I know guys that are, 5.5, 6 million top line GCI that are losing money if you take out their 500,000 of GCI, that are running like barely even running brokerage profitability, 2 to 5%. And so it is definitely not about what you make; it's about what you keep. That's awesome. What's one thing you're doing really well that we could learn from in your business? I have one that I think I'm admiring. The way you're running your recruiting, I think is. Are you still doing the? I don't know what you call them, but are you still doing the group recruiting?
The career nights?
Yep.
No, well, we're about ready to start them again. We had until about late September, we were not even having any applications coming in. It was super lean. We just didn't have anything coming. Over the course of the last 3 weeks, of course, it's October and it's starting to slow down a little bit. We're starting to get more and more people apply that are either in real estate school or 6 months to a year in the business. So we're going to start that again. I think what I'm doing really well right now is spending time with my team, because I had spent a couple of years where I wasn't spending time with them. I had outsourced sales management to a person that was not a good fit for them. And spending time with them is really what they need, as much as it's difficult for me to slow down and do that. I think that's probably what I'm doing best right now, is really just having hands-on one-on-one time with them, just bonding. And by nature of being around them, they're learning more.
Yeah, awesome. One thing I struggled with over the last decade, and I want to see how you struggle with it, or how you cope with it. It's hard chargers, like we want to get after it, and we can hardly help ourselves and start multiple businesses. Do Iron Woman stuff, whatever you do. Climb up mountains and all that stuff. How do you make sure, what practices do you have to make sure you're enjoying the ride and you're enjoying the good times, you're enjoying the struggle times? What do you do to kind of make sure you're enjoying this ride?
I think that's a work in progress. I'm working on that. I've taken personality assessments and life assessments and stuff like this for years and years and years. And my brain has a tendency to go to one of two places. It either goes to euphoria or it goes to panic. And sometimes both of those are self-created. So if, I'm being very careful right now because we finally have some cash flow coming in, and that makes me take the panic mode off and gets me euphoric, thinking, oh, this is great, let's start spending again. So I'm keeping myself in check with all of that. But enjoying the ride, we're still working on that.
Okay.
I'm very income driven, and the income is not enough right now. So.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, and I do this on the podcast, where I ask a bunch of just quick questions, and I want to just get your first initial answers. What keeps you up at night when it comes to your business?
Cash flow.
What were you most afraid of when you started building your real estate team?
Honestly, I wasn't afraid of anything. I think that may have been part of the problem.
Yeah. What's the best advice you've ever received about business?
Slow down and look at your books.
Nice. Can you share like a personal daily or weekly habit that you think contributes to your success?
Yes, over the last year, have become very diligent about my health and my time and my sleep. So have developed a habit where I'm usually in bed by 9 o'clock and I'm up by 5. When I break out of that habit, which I usually do after my race, I run the Pikes Peak Ascent every year, and usually right after the race for about a month and a half, I get slacked off. But as long as I stay in that cadence of going to bed at 9 and getting up at 5 and keep that part of my life consistent and stay exercising and watch my diet, everything else falls in place behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I forget who it is. I think it's Robin Sharma who has, or Darren Hardy, who they call it the 5 a.m. club. And I talked to somebody who said they should call it the 8 p.m. club. You know, you have like hard chargers that are getting up at 5 a.m., but they're going to bed at midnight or 1 a.m. You know, they're like trying to hack their sleep. To me, the takeaway there is get 8 hours of sleep a night. You know, not 12 to 8, obviously. Get up early, get that. What does your morning look like? What is your morning routine? What are you doing? Are you getting into the gym? Are you reading and studying? What does the routine look like?
It's pretty fast. 5 to 5:25, I'm up and immediately out the door. Usually by 5:30, out the door at the gym, and spend an hour to an hour and 15 minutes with gym time. I have 4 kids that live in our house, so usually I get home and it's chaos to get everybody out the door delivered, and then I'm in the office between 8 and 8:30.
Awesome. How about a book? You know, if someone is, you know, maybe they haven't hit the $1 million mark of GCI, what's a book you'd recommend? Like, what's a good resource that you think could change someone's trajectory if they read it?
You know, I think it depends on where you are. One of the things I had a huge challenge with was coming up with our core values, and was stealing other people's core values, was borrowing from here, you know, just writing stuff that didn't really make a lot of sense. I came to the Colorado Springs event at the Cheyenne Mountain Conference Resort and went through that process of who do we have on the team that's really successful that we would like to mirror, and developed our core values that way. But I think finding a book that helps you discover who you are. I've read a number from Simon Sinek that didn't really hit me because I'm not in that age group that I think he targets. And I'm totally forgetting the name of the book. Andy Andrews' book. Lars, I know you've read it.
Yeah, I actually met him. He came to Andy Andrews.
I can't remember the name of his book. When I was figuring out our core values, I took a lot away from that, and some of that was from, you know, somebody else who sort of led me that book. Fanatical prospecting, I think, is huge.
The Traveler's Gift.
Us, especially learning how to convert. Yes, The Traveler's Gift. Thank you. That was for me a very visual book, and it takes you. There's so many images that I got from that book as I read it that were so just reflection of where our team was and where the business was. You know, we just had to cut the cords. We had to burn the boats and start over again.
Yeah, that's really good. What should you have shared with us that you didn't?
I think some of it, another thing that I'm focused on right now that has sort of been kind of coming to my desk is that sometimes we have to shift who we're looking for. And I've always looked for recently licensed or about to be licensed agents that are new to the industry, just getting in. And I think what's sitting in front of us as an opportunity for successful teams right now is that there are some producing agents right now that are dying on the vine. And I think they're seeing the writing on the wall. And I think we can morph our business models a little bit so that we can make room for people that may not be our target, like brand new agents. People that have been in business for 5 years or 6 years and realize that they aren't going to be able to make it by themselves. And together we can create a much bigger picture process. And so we're kind of breaking down everything that I've done for so long, which is our buyer agents are not just buyer agents, they're going to be listing, and our listing agents are also going to be selling, and just finding people that can surround us that want to help us survive and thrive in the process. That, and I, on the outside, may look like I've got it figured out, but it's daily process.
Yeah, and that's two things I'll say. I think there's a golden opportunity and a shift. You know, if you've got everyone in real estate B school has access to better systems and processes and sustainability in their business. So most agents don't, and they're not going to figure it out as the market is shifting around them, especially the next 6 to 12 months. So we've got, like, you know, we went into our broker metrics and created Facebook custom audiences for every agent in our office. We're running ads to meet and greets and business masterminds, which have been hugely successful. We hired an agent off our first one, which has been awesome. So I think there is a definite shift. And also 3 to 5 years from now, it's going to be harder to compete as a solo agent, you know, where you're better off. Most real estate agents are better off with a team than they are on their own. You know, it's just a fact. We can provide the admin, the lead gen, all the sort of ancillary parts of it. So that's really awesome. How about any words of encouragement for someone that's sort of at a low point in building their business? Maybe they've had a couple bad agent hires, or they're working too many hours and they've got family that want to spend time with them. What words of encouragement could you give someone in that position?
I think reaching out to the resources and the networks you have, that is something that I've been incredibly, incredibly lucky with. Like knowing you, Lars, is I have amazing, really close personal friends in this business that are all over the country that I know I can reach out to and I can lean on. So making sure you have people you can talk to about it and being painfully honest with everybody around you. I attended a mastermind about a year ago and just laid out in front of some friends that are very successful and said, hey, look, guys, take a look at your books, look at Profit First. I went through this process and suddenly, oh my gosh, figured out we're not making any money. And how did this happen? And it shocked me how many people stood up and said, I have the same issue. So whatever you're experiencing, it's very likely other people are experiencing it, and reach out and get help. Anybody who's thinking about getting into real estate that's been doing this for a long time, I'm happy to talk to them. And because it was really, if I didn't have this office building that I have a lease on that I have a personal guarantee for, I may not be in real estate anymore. I was looking for anything else to do because this was just more than I wanted to deal with.
Yeah, man, that is, I just think as an industry, somehow it's very ego driven, and a lot of conversation I was finding, like you said, it wasn't authentic. Like you could be talking to someone who just got off a stage in front of 5,000 agents and they've got a $200 million team and they're not making money. And I'm like, how come you didn't say that on stage? Like how could you be teaching others how to do this when you're losing money? And I think part of it is just people don't know their numbers. I think that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is that generally there just is this, like, you don't feel good. There's a shame around, some of this stuff, where if we could all put our bad stuff out there, because I do the best that I can to do that, I think the world and our industry would just be infinitely better off to do that. So that's amazing. So don't hold it in. Like, share it with a mentor, with a coach, with someone that's willing to have open and honest conversations. Any final thoughts, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A, Tiffany?
No, I think we've got some exciting years to come. Part of it makes me a little bit nervous, but I went into the last shift that we had not knowing anything and not afraid of it. So I think charging into it and understanding it and surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you are. Some of those might be younger, because I've lost the ability sometimes to adapt to some of the brand new stuff people are doing. But I think going into a shift, staying out of the panic mode and staying away from the euphoric mode, but staying really just working hard and focusing on your business and focusing on your expenses and cutting them in the right place, we have an opportunity to take huge market share, I think, as the shift comes.
Yeah. And then also picking up on the comment you made earlier about, surrounding yourself, like, you just know if you're surrounding yourself with quality people or not. And like, you're going into this storm, and you better know without a doubt that even if it's just a few people, to the right and left of you, that you're all going to fight, and it's not like I mentioned it on the Lead Conversion Challenge Facebook group, the John Gordon's book, Shark, the shark and the goldfish. People don't like the word shark, and it's a 45-minute read. It's super, it's the same guy that wrote The Energy Bus and some other really good books. Highly recommend it. This market that we're coming out of, for a lot of markets around the country, it's been a goldfish kind of market, where you're just sitting in your bowl and you're getting fed referrals, and you're not even gonna have a referral system in place. And that's all getting ready to change. So really, really good. Well, thanks for your time. Let's see.
Sure.
Let's see who we've got here. So, So how many years experience again? I forgot already.
14.
14 years experience. You've probably done, if I can estimate, probably over 10 million top line GCI, I would imagine, if not more, right? Maybe 12 to 14. I don't know how many transactions, but you've got a lot of experience. So let's get some questions over here. Sandy asked a question. She said, being in Minnesota, where we're not in the tough market you're referring to, as we're still in a cooling seller's market, what should we expect, as I'm not sure what you mean? If you're not in a dried up, no inventory market, just feel blessed by it. Anywhere from 4 to 6 months of inventory is a more balanced market. I think I was talking to Tiffany at one point. How tight was your market at one point?
We had in May or April of May last year, we had 750 active listings for 4,300 active agents.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. 5 to 6 agents per listing. So that is tight. So if you're more balanced, I forget what our numbers are exactly right now. There's nothing to worry about unless it goes to you're at 6 months and it goes to 18 months as the market shifts. Most markets are going from 1 to 2 months of inventory to 3 to 4, and then it'll go to 5 to 6 over the next 12 to 18 months. Mike asked a question about career vision. Yeah, go.
One thing to add on that, though, what we're seeing is that our inventory is growing. I think we're probably sitting at about 1,500 active listings right now, which still is not a huge number, but our buyer interest has dropped significantly. So I think over the next 6 months, we're going to slowly have our inventory climb, but not a lot. We're going to just have stale market. I think we're going to have stagnancy where we're not having a lot of buyer interest and we don't have a lot of seller interest in selling because our prices are still too high, and they're going to have to come down to get the buyers reinterested, especially at rates where they are right now for interest rates.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so this is our working of the numbers, so not necessarily specific to Tiffany. So let's talk about SetMet Sign and on your team, Tiffany. How much every day is your team focusing on, that cadence? Maybe it wasn't always that way, but how's your team functioning right now with SetMet Sign?
We are still in the process of getting expert realtor services set up. So my numbers are more unclear now than they ever have been, just because we're not tracking some things correctly and tracking others. Some of it we haven't tracked it long enough. Like our Zillow leads to be Pop-Tart Forum. So we're counting those as appointments, but I almost call them like a prospecting appointment rather than an actual set appointment. So honestly, I couldn't even give you a ballpark number of what our SetMet signs are right now.
Yeah. And so Dave, to answer the question, I mean, it's generally, we look at the buy side. We do all in-office consults, which drives our show rate down tremendously, and we're okay with it. And then we sign, 80% that end up in the office. So maybe 40 to 50% show, 80% sign. So you can do the math on that. And then probably 50% buy that sign with us as loyal clients. And on the seller side, it's a lot higher because we do a pretty good job at getting folks to show. So you just got to work the numbers back. I mean, our goal next year on listing consults is, probably like 1,200 listing consults to close. I don't even know how many deals. It's way more than you think. I'll say that. Tiffany, any comment on sort of discount brokerages and are you reacting to any of that's going on, or changing business models, iBuyer models?
No, we took a few listings at a discount because we just needed the listings. But for the most part, we haven't had to. Since it started cooling off in the last 60 days, we're not finding ourselves running into it as much. Now, what probably is happening is that they're intercepting some of the people before they ever get to us, and there's not a lot we can do about that. If they never call us, we don't know they're a suspect. But we really focused on our value proposition, the strength of the team. Inside sales is a huge way to overcome discounters, because I can promise you none of these discounters have full-time inside salespeople that spend all their time looking for buyers for people's homes. And we found that to be our biggest converter, is really focusing on the inside sales process and slowing the process down to do it right, because most of these guys that are only charging 1% are throwing a sign in the front yard and hoping it sells. And we can start to show them the value and do a lot of prep work on the pre-listing appointment. So we dig in and find out what's important to them. And we tell them, we may not be the right fit for you. And as soon as you say that, they start paying more attention.
Yeah. And my thought on it to add to that is, it's there's pieces of the pie. So real estate is still going to exchange hands. And, in a market like it's not going to be a big piece of the pie. People that are willing to, give 15% off the home they're selling and, you know, do the whole iBuyer model. I don't think it's going to make as big an impact as a lot of people think it might. And then discount brokerages. I mean, it's the same deal. As long as you're providing, like, we've just made a decision that we're not going to go down that path, and we're just not willing to do it. We did 3.9% so far this year on the listing side, and it's just because we do have a very specific process. And once we get in front of somebody, we can demonstrate the value. And you can't name an industry where there still aren't premium providers of a thing. Any industry that's transformed through technology is there's still an opportunity to make the kind of money that you want to make. I don't know if I heard you mention that your agents, we have lead agents that do, mostly listings, but they'll do buyers as well. But what's your model, Tiffany?
The reason we're shifting it is because we found that if we had a buyer that started with a buyer agent that also had a house to sell, the transition of going from the buyer agent to the listing agent was really awkward and clunky. Our listing business, like most people, is a very business oriented. So we work until certain hours and don't work other hours because we have the luxury of doing that when we're listing homes versus on the buy side, they have to pop chart. So we didn't have the most success across the board transitioning buyers to sellers, or for that matter, sellers to buyer agents. And a seller who's also buying is usually a pretty easy process because once they go under contract, they kind of have to buy a house. So what we're doing is, it's kind of a combination answer to the other question about how we hire and how we retain, is that I was always afraid to tell people what they were going to have to do when they worked here because they might not take a job and we were desperate to hire. Now we tell them, and I've found myself actually making a mistake, is that if they don't hit their minimum expectation, which is 2 contracts per month for buyers and 4 contracts per month for listing agents, they have required office time. And they can graduate out of that required office time if they hit their numbers and they continue to hit their numbers, because I find that agents want to be able to be free. And if they're producing and they're taking care of my clients, I give them the freedom that they want until they aren't meeting those expectations anymore. And then the other thing that the buyer agents really want and the listing agents sometimes want is they want to be able to do both sides of the business. So until they have a certain number of transactions, about 24 transactions under their belt, and they've met their minimum expectation for 3 consecutive months, that's when they are allowed to become what we're calling more of like a qualified listing agent. So they won't be handling any of our inbound listing leads. The listing leads that we generate that are seller driven, whether it's through a mailing campaign or radio or TV, those start with a listing agent, and the buyer leads all start with the buyer agent. And then if they cross over, they can. And if they want to go door knock or call expireds or do circle prospecting and they want to go find their own business, I give them the ability to list, but they're heavily supervised in that process.
Yeah.
And it helps with our retention because we find when our agents leave, it's usually because they want to become a listing agent.
Yeah, and we do. I mean, ours is really tight and structured, and it takes every bone we have in our body to get. I gave advice to a new agent on our team. He's like, hey, it's the second day, and it's like, what advice would you give me? I'm like, give it 7 years. And agents come in and they wanna go out and list homes in their 3rd month, and we're like, no, you got to be good on the phone first. Then you got to become a showing agent, and you got to be a buyer agent for 12 months, and then you can list a home probably 18 to 24 months in. You can't even list your best friend's home. So it definitely is harder to get people, we've lost people as a result of that process, and we just know that they're going to be challenged out in the market doing everything themselves. It's just the reality, and it's the reality of where things are going too, that you've got to sort of tighten things up. David made a comment and about just cutting expenses and other than radio and TV, where else did you find cuts that made a difference in the profitability?
We cut our Zillow spend pretty significantly, and just looked at the $50, $100 a month things that we were using, and just went through my credit card statement every month as soon as it came in. I looked to see what charges were showing up on there, because I think companies make a ton of money putting you on an auto renewal that you just don't pay attention to because it's $50 a month. So just going through and looking at every single thing we were spending money on, and $50 here, $100 there just makes a difference.
Yeah, and I would say everyone go in your calendar right now and put a recurring 90-day appointment. like first Monday in January, first Monday in April, first Monday in July, and first Monday in October. And print out 90 days of your credit card statements in detail and go through and highlight and rip it apart and ask yourself the question, is this leading to a 10x return? Pretty much every dollar you spend on your team has to lead to, if it's for overhead, if it's for people, or if it's for marketing, those are all 10% of your total GCI. So every
And everybody on the team, sorry, Lars.
no,
I've got a little delay here. I didn't mean to talk over you. Everybody on the team is learning that they are responsible for paying for themselves. So if I have a staff member that costs $30,000 a year, they're responsible for $30,000 a year in business, which is you need to be pushing the team as much as we push the team, whether it's asking our clients that you're interacting with for a referral or looking for people on the street or social media. Everybody should be able to bring in enough money to cover their salary.
Yeah. And another comment, and I'm going to put the two together. Dave Fennell says, I'll have a lot of new agents in 2019. And then he asked the question, what is a good growth plan? 20% a year, question mark. So what advice would you give somebody that's planning to bring on, quote unquote, a lot of agents in a single year? And then what's a good, I've got my thoughts, but what, coming off of what you just came off of and, throwing bodies at problems, what advice would you give someone who's just hit their 100 deal mark, now looking to add a lot of agents?
Number one, I do everything I can to hire in pairs. When you hire two people at the same time, it cuts back your training by 50%. And if you can add three, if you're really equipped to handle three, then bring three in at once. But in our business, for my size, bringing in more than two agents at a time is, I think, a mistake, because we don't have enough time to get them all ramped up, because they have a tendency to talk to each other. And at 60 days, if they're not making any money, they start talking to each other, and then they both kind of snowball out. So if you bring in more than you can handle for your inbound lead flow, I think that creates problems and it creates some fear on the other agent's behalf. But hiring two at a time, but don't hire somebody if you don't feel really solid about who they are, because they're going to put a huge drain on your team, on your time, and on your culture if they're not the right one.
Yeah, and I forget who said this, but I heard once that, if you could only hire 5 agents ever in your real estate career, so you had to build your entire team on 5 agents, would you hire the person that's applying? Like, have you gone through 100 people that want a position on your team to find the 1 or 2? Those are likely the numbers, and I think folks, they want to believe that they're sitting, and I've done the same thing over and over and over and over again. You want to believe you're sitting in front of someone who's going to be the next great thing, and they haven't proved anything in their life. They haven't had a pattern of success. So that's really good. I mean, if my advice is to hire 2 every 90 days, have a goal of every 90 days, you're going to have a class of 2 start February 15th, May 15th, August 15th, and November 15th. And it's likely of those 8 in a year, you'll have 3, maybe 4 make it to 12 months and really be good fits for your team. And because they are going to talk, they think there's an easier way. They're going to do all of that stuff that Tiffany mentioned. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And what Randy just typed is exactly right, which is 2 is 1. I mean, if you hire 2 people in 6 months, you have a really good chance of having one of them. And I tell them sometimes, which is, you guys got a 50-50 shot of making this. Which one are you going to be? Which one of you guys is going to be sitting here in 6 months making a lot of money, and which one of you is going to be thinking about getting out of real estate? Because that way it creates sort of a friendly competition, and then they sort of support each other. The other thing I've found is there are times that I've hired 2 at a time that are a really good match. And once I hired 2 at a time that were a terrible match, and one of them left almost right away. So if you're hiring in pairs like that, do your best to match them. And if you match them, it's also highly likely that you also match to your team culture, because if one fit the culture and the other one didn't, they're not going to survive anyways.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, cool. I think that is all the questions. Tiffany, this has been super awesome. I appreciate you. Abner says I hired hundreds over the years. I can imagine 90% of these people should not even be in this business. Yeah, it's crazy to think of the amount of people we've hired that, aren't successful. They weren't successful with us, and they're probably not successful doing what they're doing now. crazy. Well, Tiffany, this has been awesome. The one thing I want to say is I just appreciate you being completely open about, where you've been in the last 6, 12 months. There's nothing more valuable ever than sharing truth like that. So I know that served a lot of folks on this call. So I really, really appreciate that. So, all right, everybody, that's all for now. Thanks a lot, Tiffany.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye.